to you.
So good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I'm late in. I've been having trouble with my Wi-Fi at home this morning, so I've just managed to sort it out. So thank you, Howard. Here at last. I didn't want you to miss my my loud shirt this Friday because I put it on specially. So here we are. Anyway, Philip, welcome.
Thank you.
Joining us today. This is the latest in a series of webinars that we're bringing to you courtesy of Constructing Excellence in the Southwest, the Midlands, Wales and the Northeast, together with the Housing Forum and the Structural Timber Association. And really looking forward to the next 60 minutes, Philip, for some interesting debate discussion following your presentation on getting ready for digitalisation. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Philip. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. So yes, so my name is Philip Thomas. I'm the Digital Transformation Director at Bamboo Technology Group. I've been with the company quite a short time really, only since December, but I've got a background across sort of different IT and business change roles going back long time now. So I've done director role in sort of business change, business architecture. So I guess from my side, I've been looking at a lot of this from both an IT perspective, as well as business adoption and how we actually influence this change and get it really working for the businesses. So what I'll like to do, if I can, I will share my screen. And then once that comes up, okay, is that sharing? Can everyone see that? Just hoping, John.
Yeah, I can see it's fine.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, so talk today really is around digital transformation, and I guess my take from a number of years working in this space around how we can look at it and how we can look to develop a bit of a strategy around where we want to take this in the future. So we'll start off with digital transformation and the transformation approach. So if anyone's Googled this on the internet and all this kind of stuff, there's key three principles around digital transformation. Very much it's around technology, people and process. So you cannot do digital transformation just by focusing on one specific element. The key element is that we need to make sure we're looking at and understanding how the impact of technology and digitalization will work with both people and the improvement on process. And again, it's a continuing cycle of improvement as you go. It's not a fixed case project where we're looking at, once we've done a digital transformation project, we're now fully digitized and we're running. You've got to understand that, it is a continuous cycle of improvement over time. And there's two different approaches. One is around reactive processes, around being agile and understanding what changed in the market and the sector, and being able to adjust to that as things go. And another element is around the strategic planning. And this is more around of actually having a strategic roadmap of where you want to get to. So with the reactive process, as you can see on that diagram, there's lots of external influences that can affect the needs for digital transformation. I guess people and process and technology around how innovation comes through, cyber threats, training needs, environmental impacts, and they're all sort of, again, based around this agile development of where you want to go within the transformation process. But really what I want to focus today is on not just around the reactive side, but actually understanding of where we want to go. So if we're going to start a journey on the strategic planning, actually, this is where we want to scope of what we're trying to achieve. So yes, you've got the reactive side, and that's going to continually grow. And we need to make sure that as we go through, we're looking at everything from the people, process and technology. Ideally now we're looking at, where we want to be on the strategic plan. So based on sort of previous experience, it can be quite daunting around digital transformation. But I guess for me, a lot of it is around this three-step process. And the three-step process is really around business process, technology capability, and operational maturity. And if you combine these things together, then we can start to address and understand what is in this digital strategic roadmap, with some detail around exactly what we're trying to achieve. And the goal from the session today is to really create a one-page visual illustration of what our strategy is around digital transformation. Now, I've got a bit of reputation. I do like to create these one-page visual, images for what we're trying to do. And I think a key part of that is understanding that, having or being able to illustrate the strategy on a single page just helps a lot with the adoption and the buy-in from stakeholders and sponsors around what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it. If there's lots of different documents, lots of different diagrams, then it can get a bit confused of what we're trying to achieve. So really, I'm just trying to keep it simple, but get the clarity of why we're trying to do what we're trying to do and understand the process of getting there. So we'll start off with step 1 around business process. So I've got an example here. So my previous life was in facilities services. So I used to look at sort of business architecture and business change around implementing IT solutions into facilities management. So I've taken this sort of use case really of understanding, how we tackle the process of understanding your business from that exercise. So what we started to do is just initially, and step 1 is just break down into what are the core steps of the business process. So the end-to-end life cycle of what you're trying to do. Now, this could be individual services, it could be the overall business, but it's kind of just give it a high level flavor of the core operational. So, people link this to a customer journey. So you're kind of thinking of what are the sort of the touch points of go from start to end of the process. So in this example, we've got contractual compliance, managing service requests, task delivery, tracking the financial element, and then operational performance. So in a facilities services kind of world of providing FM services, which includes asset management, incident management, breakdowns, cleaning services, all that kind of stuff, we're starting to build this high level business process. I guess we call it sort of the logical level 1, which is just the high level space. And then once we got this high level view, which I think is, quite simple and straightforward, we can then expand that a little bit to get into sort of some lower level detail. And again, we're not going into process maps at this point. We're just trying to understand within each section, what kind of steps do we go through? So if we take this in the, I guess, step 1 around the contractual compliance, within what we're trying to do is understand what master data standards we need to compile, how we capture data, and what contractual compliance we need to sort of measure around SLAs and KPIs. And then as you go through these different sections, we talk about how we manage planned work, reactive work, task scheduling, risk assessments, the delivery, the purchasing side. So we get this end-to-end process at a very high level still, but it starts, I guess, sort of illustrating that this is the delivery process of what we're trying to achieve. And for me, it's really just gives that high level view. Now, what we have to understand is for each one of these sections then, there will be a separate business process linked to it. And that's those individual business processes is where you really get into the process mapping side. We don't need to focus that at this point on this early stage, but the devil is really in the detail of, once we identify the key steps, then the processing mapping side really gives you the real detail of what people do and how they sort of manage that process. And at the bottom of the page, I've got some sort of tips, because when people talk about business process, they get quite I guess confused, or there's lots of different messages out there of what is and what isn't a business process. So just a couple of tips from me around this is around, business processes are operational processes based on roles and tasks. What they are not is around system user guides. And people get very confused when they're writing business processes, that they can turn very quickly into a system process rather than a business process. And that's where people can go massively wrong, because business processes should very much be system agnostic. And with that, they can, the operational process will stand even if you start changing the systems underneath it. Otherwise, it becomes very expensive, because you're having to then, every time you do an upgrade or a change to the system, you're having to then manually update all of your business processes, which is the wrong way to go. And I've got experience from a previous life where we started the project around a target operating model, and things went very wrong with that because at the outset, and it was a very expensive program, that the focus was around business process. Actually, what happened is at the start, they diverted to be more system led, which meant that actually the whole program of this target operating model was flawed because it was linked very much to how a system worked rather than the business process element. And it's a key element, it's a key area we need to sort of keep focused on when we're looking at business processes, is make sure it is a business process and not a system process. The other couple of points is, if we can create standard templates around process maps, then that keeps things, again, quite simple, but also it's understanding the balance between detail versus the ongoing maintenance. So as we said before, devil is in the detail with some of this, and the more granular you go down into some of these process maps, the more information you'll get. However, if you go too detailed, it can be an utter nightmare to keep these processes updated. And then the last point is, we can, in some industries and some sectors, where we're trying to define a standard business process, it can be quite difficult because if a company is really working at different sectors, it doesn't really work to have one standard operating model. But I think we need to, I guess, grasp that and accept it. And the way that we can do it is that actually we can introduce what I've created is a business process framework, which is we can have a standard high level process, but then understanding that actually we're allowed to vary that at contract or sector level to be specifically, if it's a commercial contract or it's a government contract or public-private sector, there may be slight variations, but say, don't try and overcomplicate it, keep the standard process, but be able to expand it and do a gap analysis of where it needs to vary across sectors. So really that's step one. So step one is we're going to document up the core level steps of my business process. So after step one, then we're going to do, okay, I've understand what I do within my business, and within that business, I'm tracking those key steps. So the next phase of my plan is understanding what systems are linked to the key points within that process. So in the diagram you've got on screen at the moment, I've then started mapping out the core processes that we do at the top, which we've brought across, but then from a system level at the bottom of the screen, understanding of what systems support that part of the process and identifying which parts of the systems, again, will support the individual sections. And the idea of this is that we can then start understanding the key drivers around, how data is moving between systems, what the capability of the systems are, whether we're using the full capability, whether there's new enhancements of the systems available but we're not using. So it just starts us mapping out against the core process what key systems we need. And the reason we do that is because once we start looking at where we want to improve and improve the process and improve the digital element, we know that we can start looking at what parts of the systems can actually support that improvement. So again, at this level, I've just listed out the key system components, what supports the business processes. There is an extra level of detail you need to go into. Again, this is, I guess, the second phase of the project, which is at a more granular level. How can we then start capturing the information around those systems? So in the business architecture world, we have this standard diagram, and there's 4 layers to sort of core systems. And I'll talk you through them. So at the base level, it's around technical architecture. Technical architecture is just really about where do these systems sit? So what is the physical hosting? Are they on physical servers? Are they on virtual servers? Are they hosted in a data center? Are they cloud SaaS solutions? But it's understanding that physical element of where your software is. The next layer above that is around the application itself. So the application is around, is it a web-based application? Does it have mobile capability? What software does it use? How is it supported? Understanding that next layer up, which is around the application itself. And then as we move up through the layers, the next bit is around data. So again, do we understand within that software application what data it holds? And if we can understand and map the data it holds and where that data goes between other integrations and shared between different systems, it can help us drive the better use of that data. So for example, if we're looking at the slide previously where we've got the different systems between the finance systems and a core management system, then at some point the jobs from the core management system need to interface with the financial system to get the job costing element. So we were able to, at this view, understand how data flows between the systems. And then the level above that is around the business architecture, which again points to that previous slide of, do we know the processes, the business processes that drive how that system is then developed? So all this is sort of really, really useful information that we can start capturing around what is our current technology landscape. And it does feed into this project and the strategy around digital transformation. But I guess the other really important thing is that we can really use that data to support other initiatives as well. So if we're looking at ISO certifications and accreditations around, especially around 27001 around the information security, once we have this information to hand as part of this project, you can use it in lots of other areas of the business to make sure that we know exactly what we've got. And it's vital around data security of what data do we hold, how are we using that data, and where does it go? So from 27001 GDPR, it's all really valid to capture this level of information. So that's around, I guess, technology capability. And then once we've got these two stages, and I said, it's quite, this three-stage simple process is that, first of all, we've got, again, going back to the step one, which is the processes at the top. Step two, which is the system capability at the bottom. But the really key bit now is this bit in the middle. And what we're trying to assess is the operational maturity around how you follow that process with the systems we have in place. And really, you cannot begin a journey around digital transformation until you can assess that baseline of what are we doing. So what I started to do is trying to map that into this single page view. So where I've taken it really is being able to identify that we have different layers of operational maturity within this view. So at the bottom layer, it's very much around the baseline. And the baseline is really, what are we doing today? Now, some contracts or some businesses may look at that and say, well, actually, that baseline should be making sure that I'm keeping my people safe. I'm compliant to legislation. So from a health and safety perspective, we're making sure we're tracking, we're measuring, we're doing everything we need to do. And we're also, making sure that we are, delivering the contract in line with any SLAs or, financial models. So this is your basic, I'm coming in, I'm doing it, and this is the basic level. Now, as I said, some companies may look at that and say, well, actually, once we start looking at it, we may be even below baseline. And the first part of any project, if there is elements, is to get you to that level. And to get you to that level, we need to make sure that we address anything from a health and safety perspective to make sure we can capture it. So in this model on screen at the moment, what we've been able to identify is that at baseline level within this facilities service contract, then we've very much got how we're capturing basic manual information around classification standards, defining roles, responsibilities, manual sort of how we manage breach and escalations, how we capture sort of chargeable works, and that is your basic level. But really then what we can do is, this is, I guess, the key of the project, is identifying the areas that we can improve. And that's where the next two levels in this sort of maturity model is identifying how we can then specify key elements of improvement. And it's very much driven by the investigations we've done around the system capability and process improvements. So what we're trying to do in those levels is say, right, how can we be more either efficient, increase productivity, drive up margin, or be more compliant with the services we provide? Because that's got to be the driver between the reason to go into this digital transformation model. So we're trying to be more efficient with it. And as you go through this exercise of creating this model, we can start understanding of, where does these improvements come from. So I guess from in this scenario, we've got the contract setup data, then we got like a call help desk system, which is how you manage calls, and then you've got your task delivery. And we've got to be able to identify the areas that we can improve on that productivity. And I guess for an example, what I did at sort of the previous company is that we looked at one specific aspect, which is around the call classification element, and decided to understand of how can we do that improvement. And what we identified is that there's key area around the help desk function in itself. So the help desk is where people are calling in, and there's a large team on the help desk, lots of calls coming through, and then the calls are being logged and assigned to engineers. And that process in itself was taking a long time to manage. So through this kind of model, we're looking at it on both the process side and also the technology side. And what we're able to identify is that in the system that we're using, it was actually quite slow to log a call. And the reason why it was very slow to log a call was that when the help desk operator was filling in the information, there was lots of drop-down lists. So actually it was in the drop-down list, you were having to search through a very huge amount of data to try and find the accurate sort of classification structure of how you wanted to log that call. So every call that's coming in, it was taking way too long to initially log that call. So what we're able to do from a system perspective is just say, well, actually, let's go back to our data structure. And by actually filtering the data into a more of a hierarchy, you could simplify and quicken up the process of being able to select the correct classifications, to which one made it simpler for the help desk operators, got better adoption because they really liked how it worked, and speeded up the process. We then looked at it from a process perspective and said, well, actually, we've still got high demand in the volume of calls we're taking. So can we look to, introduce a new process around how that can be more efficient? So again, by introducing the function of a customer portal to this system, was that customers were able to log calls directly through the system rather than having to phone the help desk, which meant that, again, we're using technology to make that more efficient, so that a lot of the calls were coming through the system itself rather than via the phone. And that enabled the help desk operator to focus more on escalations and the management of the delivery of those calls rather than just answering the phone. So you can quite quickly start modeling up how some of these improvements will then go into that digital transformation project, and building up the productivity and efficiency. And I think most of the time it's going to be quite easy to identify where those improvements can be made and then map them into this structure. Occasionally, you may be looking at, well, actually, how do I really assess what is the best area to focus on within that next stage of development? And I've been looking at another sort of, I guess, model, which is around value chain mapping. Now, value chain mapping is quite interesting. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this call because it'd probably take another 45 minutes just to talk about value chain mapping. But value chain mapping can be a way of, again, understanding what you do within the business, identifying the links, so from an end-to-end perspective, and then understanding and trying to model in, if I change one part of it, does that impact other parts of my business? And by doing that, you're able to prioritize that actually, if I change this part over this bit, then that has a greater efficiency on the broader perspective. And you can use this value chain mapping to just visualize the different impacts. And although you can see that on this end-to-end view, I guess the key bit that it doesn't show is that how these things interlink. And it's quite interesting when you look at, especially when you're sort of doing, working with operational teams, is that they will work in their own specific area and identify changes there. But actually, if you change the start of the process around the data setup and configuration, that can have a massive impact on the end stage, which is your reporting. And if it's different teams that are operating both those elements and they're not joined up, you've got to understand that what we're changing has an impact across this end-to-end life cycle. And it, this model hopefully helps people understand that, my bit is part of a bigger picture, and where we're making these enhancements and changes, then it really adds the value by understanding the impact of that change across the whole business. So that's stage 3 around the operational maturity model, and being able to identify these steps. So really, if I go back to what I originally wanted to try and achieve within, I guess, these 30 minutes, and hopefully trying to get this understanding and simplification of a digital transformation strategy, what I wanted to do is produce this picture. And if you look at this picture, it very much breaks it down into top level, what we do, bottom level, what systems provide those functions, and then in the middle, and the operational maturity is what we currently do around where we want to go and how we measure and drive the efficiency. And really, once you've got this on a single page, hopefully everyone will agree that it just makes it a bit easier to get this message out around what are the benefits from this digital transformation. And this can be used at, different stakeholders around board level to all users, operational teams, to say, well, actually, this is why we want to do this. And you've got this visual aid to map this out of where we're trying to get to. And even with bids and, if you're tendering new work, one of the biggest things I've done on major sort of government contracts is, when we start work with on a new contract, is being able to articulate that on day 1 of that, we can't expect to be running at a fully enhanced level because we don't have the right data and we don't have the right experience to really run at that level. It's very much of, explaining that there's a evolution and this maturity that you need to go through to be able to collect the right data and know what you want to do with that data and then use effectively to improve the business. So this is very much around this model and hopefully a strategy which will kind of give you a bit more of a detailed flavor of what we're trying to achieve. And it's not just lots of fluffy diagrams and strategy stuff which can be a bit woolly. I really wanted to make it so you can understand the key elements. So once we've got the I guess the development roadmap, the next phase of it is really around how you track that, and you can track that in loads of different tools around, whether it's just standard project delivery tools, but you can then start capturing that information. Being part of, I guess, Bamboo Technology Group, I've got a bit of an advantage in this space because I've got a software development team that actually can help develop software to manage this. So one of the things we are working on in the background, and something that we will implement as part of our work we do with customers around digital transformation, is developing this compliance portal. And this compliance portal will basically take the elements that we've identified within the transformation plan, and then start mapping the individual tasks and issues against that. So rather than it just being a strategy, we're now looking at taking that strategy and the plan into delivery. So at this level, we can identify all the different the elements, work out what needs to happen around these tasks, identify if there's any specific issues relating to those tasks, and then track progress. So again, you're able to show that actually we're now doing some improvements which will make that efficiency gain. And that's, it's just that ongoing piece, which will be ongoing, as we, move forward on the project. So that's kind of the main factors that we're looking at. And I just want to sort of jump back to this sort of strategic roadmap. And the last point I really just wanted to make before sort of we go to questions is, this whole plan produces a lot of additional information sat behind the scenes. So that includes the business processes we've worked up before. It includes the business architecture and system profiling stuff. But once you've got that collateral behind the transformation project, then you can really start to use that across the business. We mentioned before that the technology architecture documents can be used within, the ISOs and your GDPR. Additional elements can be around HR and training. So once we understand this end-to-end model, we can start detailing training needs and induction requirements. So if you've got a help desk team coming in, they can be talked through, the elements that they're responsible for within the end-to-end cycle, but also understand that they are one cog in a bigger wheel, in the fact that anything they do has an impact down the line, and understanding the full end-to-end process hopefully gets them more engaged with what they're trying to do. And if they do things correctly and capture the right information, it will make things a lot easier throughout the chain. So although this we talk today is very much around digital transformation, there's so many other benefits you get from capturing this collateral around, inductions, training requirements, qualifications, business impact assessment, business continuity. So business continuity, through the pandemic is, how resilient are our systems? Well, if you haven't got this sort of understanding of what systems you've got and how you can access them and where they sit, and can you access them remotely and how that data moves, if you haven't got that, it's very difficult to really properly understand your business continuity arrangements. And people that have gone through this exercise and kind of have this baseline knowledge, it is so much simpler to try and manage going forward. So, although it's digital transformation, I think the bigger point is that actually it can support a wider part of the business rather than just digital. So that's kind of it from the presentation. So I guess it's really just a case of going to some questions, if that's okay. I don't know what the time is, but hopefully we haven't run too far over or under.
Thanks, Phil. Super. I'm interested to see if we have some questions. No one's actually put anything into the Q&A menu yet. So I wonder if it would be a good idea if we've got hands up, and certainly the first person to do that is Thomas. So I'm going to bring him in because I know he made a comment or two in the. Just trying to find you, Thomas, here, so I can bring you in. Yep, there we go.
We've also got a question. We've also got a question from chat pane, Howard, as well, which is
yep. I've got a chat pane question. Just bringing Thomas in now. So Thomas, you should be able to.
Can I just stop sharing the screen now as well?
Can I stop sharing? Yeah.
Yes, please, Phil. People didn't see you. Super. Thanks very much. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I found this presentation quite useful for what I do, and I've kind of linked it up with a previous presentation that we had on intangible value. So there's an element of you are going, a business is going to transform, is going to go through a change, and there is invariably the requirement or the need for people who should be capable or who have got the know-how to support that transformation. And what I am supporting at the moment, coincidentally, is managing implementation of BIM and digital processes within a business unit for the construction company that I work for. So I guess one of the challenges that we face, or which we need to know how to manage, is to ensure that we get enough buy-in from senior management. So my question would be, how do you demonstrate or get senior management on board to support the digital transformation, just like your presentation is?
Yeah, so I think, and that's one of the reasons I'm trying to build this, I guess, single page view, to try and get that clarity that it's not just technical people that are looking at this. We need to get the buy-in from the senior management team in understanding how these changes can affect either compliance, productivity, or efficiency, and really articulating this maturity model and how that can gain. And I think there's one bit is showing the vision, and you're having this vision on screen around the roadmap, but then it's as you take that into delivery and then you're tracking the elements specifically, at that point you can then start understanding the productivity gains and measuring it. So we're looking at return on investment, really, because you've got to have that visibility of, okay, we've moved from from planned maintenance to more predictive maintenance, for example. What does that mean to us? So at least, and that's, I guess, the key point of that that tracker tool, is being identify, where you are, assess what you've done to improve it, and then try and put a quantitative measure around how that has made you savings. And it's difficult at times because some of them aren't necessarily a financial saving. It can be more of a health and safety benefit. But at least you've got an opportunity to track and show. And I think that's the key part of it, is around business adoption, is if people can see the benefits that this process is going to bring, they will be be more engaged with the process. And it's all around adoption and engagement. If you can communicate what we're trying to do and show that it's happening, the senior management team hopefully will buy into that. And it's our responsibility as, I guess, change managers in being able to articulate that in the right way. And some people will have a very different approach to it. It's just that from my side, it's I like the more visual approach, to be able to talk through a diagram rather than lots of words and text.
Yes.
But,
yeah, which is I think you hit the nail on the head there when you talked about some of these benefits will not be financial aside, or will not be apparent to be financial, but which again links back into what I said, the intangible value presentation that we had before, that you may not actually see it physically, but the actual value that it is providing to the company or to the business is quite significant.
Yeah.
And again, I think I put in the chat box there about having like that one pager, sort of a visual. It's how you then either put a bit more detail into that, or just leave it as a skeleton, so that people may ask the question and say, what do you mean by that box? What do you mean by bits and pieces? So you might, I'm just thinking on my feet here, that it might be that you could, I don't know if the one page that you've got is the one that you've just shown us, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a balance. It's some people want more detail, some people want less, and it's that flexibility of knowing your stakeholders really, and being able to But the key thing is we're asking people to invest potentially in this this change in the transformation project, and we've got to be able to articulate what the benefit of that is and the progress. And for me, having it on this one diagram, though it's not in a massive amount of granular detail, it at least gives people, I guess, they can see where we're trying to go with it.
And I guess you will have any other detail that you need to support any aspect of that diagram with you anyway, so that if anybody asked any further detail, asked any further questions, you can just whip out.
And it's all this is just exactly. This is the front page of lots of additional detail that sits behind the scenes, really.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, I have a question now. It's got on the chat pane, so I'll read it out, Phil.
Okay.
Who do you think in the business should be involved in a digital innovation transformation project for it to be successful? And is there a typical time frame in which businesses should expect to be able to deliver radical changes to their ways of working?
Okay. Yeah, big question. So I guess from an engagement level, the key part is if you take the different sections we've got in this diagram, then the key bit around business process and operational knowledge, we need people that understand the business from a day-to-day perspective of actually doing the BAU process. They are the people on the help desk, they are the people, the engineers that are utilizing the current processes and systems. You will get more feedback from speaking to those guys than from I guess we respect the senior management team that aren't doing it on a day-to-day basis. So you need to get that feedback from those guys. And then from a system capability level, it's around from a technology side, we need to get that feedback around what are the systems, what are the capability of those systems, what is the new functionality they can deliver. So it's very much a bit of a team approach. You need a coordinator, you need somebody that's going to lead this and bring all that information together. But you've got to do this as an overall business perspective. However, I guess the key point of this is that around timescales, it does depend on the complexity of the business and how far you want to go down. But if we're trying to, kick this project off around strategy and, digital transformation, it wouldn't take more than a few weeks to come up with this initial view. Yes, there's going to be a lot of work that then goes behind the detail, and it's the detail which really deliver the changes. But to get to this, space around just doing a high level view, it shouldn't take more than 3 or 4 weeks really to understand and map out that core goals and objectives. And I think that's the key part of it. When I've worked on big target operating model projects before, you're looking at a 2-year project, spending millions of pounds, and halfway through that, they change their mind and go off in a different direction. What we're trying to do is, by showing something very early on in the project or the program, then you start getting better engagement with the different stakeholders. So, and that's, I think, why I was really trying to say, we can make this simple if we want to, and do it at this level just to get the ball rolling. Once you get the ball rolling, then it grows legs, and we can then start capturing the lower level detail. Hopefully that answers.
Thanks very much for that. We have a question here that I'll read out, or you can look at on the Q&A menu. Come from Drew Wiggett. How have you found client engagement during the pandemic? Second question, has this changed your approach to engagement sessions?
Through the pandemic, it's interesting because actually we started a lot of these conversations around digital transformation. But I guess a lot of it is focusing more on the technical architecture. But what's been happening as we've been going through in the ongoing discussions with customers is that there's one part understanding, what their baseline system levels are. But, when people can't go into the office, they can't get onto these systems and need to be able to, understand their business process better. It's really opened people's eyes to, this type of approach. And I was speaking to one customer a few weeks ago where they actually were quite successful in being able to reopen quite quickly. It was a financial association, but they were lucky because they actually went through an exercise of fully mapping out their high-level business processes before anything happened. So they were able to look at that and really identify what they needed to do quickly to get up and running, whether other companies probably have found it a lot harder to really understand who needs access to do what on what system with what data and how they need to engage with the customer. So I think it's a bit of an eye-opener for a lot of people in that, actually, if we can start on this journey, it will help the business in longer term. So I guess that is one part of the question. I'm just trying to think, what was the other one, Andrew?
Okay. Yeah. No, the second part was, has this changed your approach? Has this changed your approach to engagement sessions?
I guess not really. It's, when through Bamboo, a lot of it is that when we pre-pandemic, we had lots of sessions with different companies, and it was very much around this board. We have a big workshop, and we had lots of people face to face in a session, understanding and mapping out what they do, how they do it, and what systems align to it. I guess it's not changed it in approach of where we want to take it. What we're doing now is making it more virtual. So again, there's nothing stopping, it's nice to be in that face-to-face big meeting room and be able to sketch on walls and map these things out. But there's, you can still do that. It may take a little bit longer, but it's very easy to do this virtually. And I think that's going to be a way going forward as well. I think that's going to be happening for a while.
That question came from Drew. Unfortunately, I was unable to open your microphone quick enough, but I have done now, Drew. Do you want to follow on from anything from your question there?
No, not follow on, but just to say that, yeah, that was a really useful and helpful answer. I think, with regards to the engagement sessions, I think it's a good point you make, Philip, isn't it? The environment I work in at TNT, we run, Turner and Townsend, we run similar sorts of engagement sessions where you're in a room with people and, you've got your whiteboard, your post-it note type environment, and it's just how you've sort of translated that onto that online environment, and how you've had to adapt and maybe smaller group sessions or rules of engagement and things like that.
Yeah, and it is, I think you're right, it is, they tend to be smaller groups. It is a bit harder to draw. So I've got these, the whiteboard on screen and the pens and all that kind of stuff. It's not so great being able to, it's a lot easier to draw on walls and all that kind of stuff,
yeah.
Quicker. So you do have to adjust the skills, and rather than doing it maybe in an all-day session, it's often sort of broken up into smaller sessions of capturing key bits, going away, working up what that is. So you probably have more sessions, but smaller ones rather than a big day workshop. But it's just, again, being a bit agile of, we have to work with the situation we're in at the moment.
Yeah. And do you think it's maybe this current situation has maybe changed, how you assess someone, as you say, how you assess someone's digital maturity? It's how fit are they to work sort of not offline, but out of the office environment and things like that. It's now a key question.
Oh, huge. I think it's it's opened people's eyes massively to having this understanding. And for me it's great because I've been banging on the drum for years around it's really, we need to we need to understand the system capabilities, we need to manage how we work, and sometimes it's like, oh, it's fine with this, just get away with it, but it's really opened people's eyes to the importance of it. And I think for me, the companies that do want to adopt it will be a lot more successful.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Do we have any more questions? We don't seem to have any more in the Q&A menu, but if anyone's got a question, raise their hand and I'll bring you straight in. No immediate hands going up. So I think Phil.
Can I ask? Phil? Yeah, hi, John Savage. You mentioned some of the mistakes you've seen on big projects. In your experience, what are the typical mistakes people make when starting a journey like this, and what should they do to prevent that?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest mistake, so say previous company I worked at, massive construction facilities management company, turnover 2 billion. So they started a target operating project, and with that they had a budget of I think £6 million. And the biggest mistake they made around identifying the business process was that they linked it to a system. So what they actually did was every process they drew up and identified was around how they wanted to use one system to manage all their work. And so the business process elements were not system agnostic. It was driven by how this system needed to follow these button clicks to do that process. And what happened halfway through that project was that there was a realization that actually they've massively over-engineered this huge system to do all the different variances, when a lot of the smaller contracts and business units didn't need that gigantic system. So they wanted to use a different system with less functionality, but what they needed. But then the business process documentation didn't work because it was all linked to a certain system. So I think the biggest message for me is, if all this is around business process, you're looking at how you improve business process through digitalization. So if you need to understand what a business process is, and a business process is around the operational steps, the roles, responsibilities of what people do. And if we can get that clear, then it's the best start you can do. If you link it to just the way a system works, it will cause you problems in the long run. And that company ended up writing off a whole £6 million cost because they could not use the target operating model. And that was a big lesson, I think, for them, in that they wasted a hell of a lot of money on a system which was over-engineered and couldn't be used.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
There's another question.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions come up. What I'm going to do is quickly try and bring these people in. So the first one will be Bola. I'll try and bring you in, and then Richard. So I'll open up Bola and you can come straight in. Right, Bola, you should now be able to ask a question straight away.
Gentlemen, Philip, great presentation. Thanks, Andy, Howard, John, etc. So my question was around the business processes associated with professional services firms, and how you are either aware or how you consider the challenges associated with defining those processes and interfacing that with digital transformation. And I'm using an example of a firm of surveyors. So given that they're not builders per se, they don't build things, so the operational process is slightly different. It's more about intellectual property and thought processes and reports, etc. How does typically a firm of surveyors consider a journey of digital transformation, taking in point their business processes as a specific focal point in that strategic map? Bit of a wide question, but what I'm trying to say is basically, how would you implement a DT program for a professional services firm? Because I think it's slightly easier with a building type, maybe facilities management type entity, where there's a product or something that they're servicing. But with professional services, it's more about intellectual property, thought processes, meetings, interpreting data, and producing advice. So what would you consider in that?
Yeah, I guess, I've not worked in that area, but, for me, business, there's still a process around of, I guess, what you actually do, and can we get to a model of identifying and mapping that out? And with, I guess, professional services, there would be still, I guess, rules of engagement around how you structure that customer engagement of what you do, and the terms of reference of, how you charge and what you provide, which is one element of it. Then it's that engagement process of how you then interact with those customers, what you provide, how you manage I guess it goes back to the delivery of those actions, but also the costing side of it, because it may be professional services, but you're still providing a service and charging for that element. And then it's the invoicing processes, the reporting, how you analyze and do that. So yes, there will be very, processes, and there may be lots of more variations with that process, but I'd still probably approach it in very much the same way, as in sitting down with that company and understanding from a day-to-day perspective from the different teams what they actually do and what they need to measure. Because say for me, maybe oversimplifying it too much, you still got a day-to-day job that you do, and how can we articulate and document those steps of whose responsibility is to follow those certain actions, and that engagement. Does that kind of help?
It does help. I mean, and I think just taking on board your response, you can see the kind of challenges that professional services firms will face. And I'm almost inspired that we've had a colleague from Turner & Townsend on this call as well, Drew, who asked the previous question. But the surveying profession in particular is at a crossroads with technology and disruption caused by it. So I think it's a conversation that may grow for you in particular. And like you, I've been here in this space for a long time. So I'm quite excited about what digital transformation means. The challenge is to demonstrate what that looks like, and then also to convert what that looks like into a business case around return on investment.
Yes, yeah. It's all about that, because I say you've got to, we're not doing this for fun, really, are we? There's got to be a return on the investment for going down that route. But it needs people that, I guess, know the industry and know the sector, that can actually, support the modelling process. So you need that engagement from the teams. Otherwise, it's just a more theoretical plan. I've been working in the facility sector, pre-Bamboo for probably 15 years. So I kind of know asset management inside out. But, for other sectors, you need the people, the SME that can support, providing the information to map it.
Yeah, fabulous. Appreciate that.
No
Thank you.
Howard, I think we better make Richard's question the final one, don't you?
I definitely think so. So over to you, Richard.
Philip, thank you. That was very interesting. Having worked for a large multinational contractor that was a victim of a cyber attack that took out all of our internal IT technology for 3 months, which meant we could use external stuff like gaining access to drawings through 4 projects, etc., but nothing internally. How do you plan against that?
I think, that's one of the intangible benefits we get from running this transformation project, because what it does, it really drives the understanding of what you've got within your systems. So when I talked about that architectural model, and being able to map out, the underlying architecture, so the physical infrastructure of what you've got, where it sits, what application it is, and the security and wraps around it, you can then take that base knowledge and do an impact assessment against it. So, and I've done this for previous companies, is we map what they've got, And then you can look at it from a technology view to say, well, actually, where's the key risk points? So have we got key vulnerabilities across that overall network that mean that there's risk of either a cyber threat, some intrusion, hacking, anything, that at least you can start mapping where the key risk points are. Once you've identified the risk, you can then mitigate the risks. And again, that will form part of, because, you know, for digital transformation, it's a two-pronged attack, really. You've got your business processes coming from the bottom, and then system capabilities coming from the top and then coming from the bottom. So it's not all about just improving the processes. You know, we need to look at that technology layer underneath and make sure that is really resilient. And you know, and again, once you've mapped out exactly what you've got, you can then identify the risks and mitigate it. And I find it really interesting that I speak to a lot of companies and you ask them a basic question, okay, you know, what systems do you have? Where do they sit and how do people access them? And a lot of people just don't know. And that's where you get a problem, because if you don't know, you can't fix it. And, you know, this whole program and strategy is all around building up your base knowledge. If you understand what you've got, you can work with it. If you don't know what you've got, you are open to all kinds of threats.
Philip,
Howard, I think we'll just fit in that one final question. Perhaps if you'd like to read it out, rather than take the time to bring Susan on.
Yep, there are thousands of students in higher education on construction-related programs at the moment. I have the privilege of working at a university, and it is critical we get the curriculum right for graduates to drive this transformation. What do you consider is essential in the curriculum of the future generation, for the future generation, probably?
I guess, yeah, it's with that, I guess from the digital transformation side, it's really in that curriculum, again, it's understanding. And I guess for me, it's around that methodology, is that, you know, for people when they're starting their journey within the education, is that you don't want to just focus on one specific element. You've got to be able to, if you go back to that original slide I had, which is around people, process and technology, you know, you've got to have that appreciation of, if you're going to work in the technology space, then, you know, technology on its own does not work. It's all around how that works with people and process, and you've got to have that knowledge. So if I was, you know, able to influence some of these sort of educational programs, it's making sure that whichever sector you're going into, you are looking at transformation around those core elements. So you know what skills you need, what the processes are, and what the technology provides. And it's only when you tackle it from those three perspectives, it will really be beneficial. And if you've got people that can understand that, I think they have got so much better opportunities in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Over to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you very much. It is just after 1 o'clock and I am aware people have got busy diaries. So a very quick thank you to you, Philip. No problem. I think you will have seen by the quantity and quality of the questions how interesting people found your presentation. So thank you very much for joining us today. As always, thank you to Howard and John for hosting. And just to say, ladies and gentlemen, it's a busy week for us next week. We're concentrating on MMC, Offsite Solutions. On Tuesday, we have Dan Macy from Holistic Housing Solutions talking to us generally about build, and the role that MMC is going to play in post-COVID construction UK. And then on Friday, I'm delighted to say that we've got two members of Welsh Government joining us. They're going to talk to us about their innovative housing programme and the role that MMC is going to play in that. In between, we have a one-off event coming up on Wednesday at 11:30, and that is looking at the road to recovery and what the new norm will look like. It's an hour and a half. It's a presentation in a conference online format, and we're particularly excited that we've got a speaker that's going to give a case study on the building of the Bristol Nightingale Hospital. So that's Wednesday 11:30, and something not to be missed. Another busy week for all of us. I wish you now a good afternoon and a fabulous weekend. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Phil.
No problem.
Have a great weekend.
Brilliant. Cheers all.
Could you let